Hello and welcome to the Miscast table. My name is Jonas, and today, since Måns is off on his vacation, we get some free time and I thought we would use it to discuss the spellcasting aspect of Underworlds. I think it's a fun core mechanic of the game, it thematically fits perfectly with the game. There should be wizards out there casting their magics, affecting the battlefield and earning some glory for their commanding players. But I also feel that there are issues with spellcasting in its current form in Underworlds. I think that there's a discussion to be had, and we would be very willing to hear from you guys and girls what you think on the subject about how spellcasting could be redesigned or changed so that there would be a more interesting and rewarding way of utilizing it in the game. I think there is room for improvement, and I thought that we would make this kind of video where we pitch some ideas which could be entertaining in of itself, or at least try to learn something about spellcasting in its current form and why we think that it is a problem. So starting off, if we take a look at this table up here, we get to see the average percentual chance of casting a spell in Underworlds. And as the magic system goes, you are utilizing the magic dice, which has one side showing a crit, two sides showing the focus or swirly symbol, and then you have three sides showing the channel or the lightning symbol. And I think that the part of rolling the dice is really fun. It's exciting to roll die. You have the chance of things going good, possibly great if you do get those crits, or even the risk of failing, but that only adds to the excitement. There should be some risk for all those reward that you might reap from casting powerful magic. But if we get into the core issues that I want to discuss in this video, I think that starting off, spells in Underworlds are too weak. And I would like to make the case by taking a look at these numbers. Because if you have a warband that has access to a level 2 wizard, and not all warbands do, then you are looking at the reality that each and every time that you want to include a spellcasting card in your deck, you're also including a minor percentage of, or a major if you are looking at one of those powerful cards, percentual chance of missing out on exactly that effect. Meaning that each and every spell card has like a clause that 1/10 of the time it's gonna do nothing, or if you're a level 1 wizard, 1/3 of the time it's gonna do nothing, 50% of the time it's gonna do nothing. And since each and every card that is a spell card has this kind of like downside, every time you're including a multitude of these cards, you are stacking those loss percentages against yourself. Because if you have 3 spell cards in your deck, you are gonna need to analyze them and look at them in conjunction with each other. So that if you have 10% chance of failing the first card, then another 10% chance of failing the other one, and then you have 56% chance of failing the third one. Then you are stacking the odds against yourself. And I think this kind of thing isn't easily available, like this kind of information isn't easily available to a new beginner. And I don't think that many of the more advanced players actively consider this as well. And it even further adds onto itself if you are playing a multitude of games or a series of games, because over time you're going to get into those games where all of the spells fail, or you have high variance so that you don't feel like your deck is performing the way you want in each and every time you do bring it to the table. And adding on to that even further is the risk of losing your wizard in any part of the game. Because if your opponent managed to kill your wizard, then you're going to be left with a bunch of spell cards in your drawing deck that you're going to draw into, and if you get them into your hand, they're going to do nothing because you're going to lack the wizard that you need to be able to cast them. And this kind of like downside is a problem, because I think that, adding on to my statements previously, the spells are simply too weak. If we compare spell cards against other power cards, such as the upgrades or ploy cards, then we also quickly find that most of the spell cards in Underworlds in its current form doesn't really do all that much more than any other card that is available to the player that only includes ploy or upgrade cards in their deck. If we take a card for an example, and I think it's good to think of cards as resources, and I like to discuss with Måns that each and every card has a certain baseline when you compare them to one another. So that if you take a card such as sidestep or distraction, when you are able to pick a fighter, push them 1 hex, and then be happy with that outcome, then you are able to compare that kind of card against others and say, like, this card allows me to push 2 fighters, although they are only minions, or this kind of card lets me pick a fighter anywhere on the board and push them 1 hex. And although this kind of push mechanic has been a bit scarce in this last season, it's still a meaningful way of thinking of cards when you want to build a certain deck that is looking for that effect on the board. Other baselines might be the ability to deal 1 damage with a drawback, or the ability to make a card give some defensive capabilities to a fighter. You have the upgrade cards which might affect dice roll or add 1 die to the pool when you're trying to make an attack, or you can adjust the range. There's a plentiful amount of people that are really good at this kind of comparison. I'm not, but I think that the idea of comparing cards is a sound one. And if we do get back to the spellcasting aspect, then we can take a new card, one such as Iara's Summons, which comes from the Exiled Dead warband, which reads, if successfully cast, pick a fighter within 3 hexes of the caster, then push that fighter 1 hex closer to the caster. So if we are looking for the kind of effect that allows us to push enemy fighters, we're gonna find that there isn't really all that many cards that allows us to do that. So we might consider this card. But then we compare it to another ploy card, one such as this. Then we find out that if we take this card instead, we do lose out on 1 range, but we do get the upside of always being able to utilize this card. And I think that too many spell cards in Underworlds have this kind of situation where you have ploy cards that are perfectly interchangeable for the spell card. And the only time where you would possibly consider the spell card above the ploy card is when you are looking for having access to that effect in multitude, so that you really want to be able to push that enemy fighter 1 hex. And that isn't really speaking well for the kind of design and thought that goes into spell cards. I think that too often they are not unique enough. I think that there could be a case made where Games Workshop should really be forced to rethink spellcasting wholly. I think that not only do spell cards need to be on average stronger, because there is a risk of them doing nothing and failing. I also think that the spells need to be more uniquely designed, so that they have their design spells capable of doing things that no other kind of card is able or capable of doing. I don't want to leave you without some few examples, so I prepared a set of cards that I think could be an interesting way of changing how spellcasting could be done in Underworlds. And one of the first ideas I had was that instead of having spell cards that is only able to either you get the full effect or nothing of the effect, add some scalability to the card, so that if you try to cast a spell and your wizard manages to tap into the ethereal plane and draw a part of the energies, you get a minor upside. But if you do manage to get a powerful channel, then you get a bigger reward, and if you do manage to get a crit, then you might get a fantastic outcome, or even a critical mishap because you draw too much power. So I prepared these 2 cards, which I think is an example of what could be done, lending some inspiration from the fantasy realms that we do when you're also playing. And another design area I think that they could go with their spells is this kind of card, where you try to make spells a kind of a toolbox utility for warbands. Whereas ploy cards often have a very specific effect that they are able to do, like push one fighter 1 hex. I think that being able to have spells and see them as lores where you could choose different outcomes depending on the situation you're currently in could make it so that you can keep the cards at their current power level, but where you get the reward for including them in your deck from the ability to choose what kind of effect that you are interested in its current state, so that you get some more utility. You might use it as an offensive means, but you might also use it as a defensive means when you really need it. And that's everything for today. And if you think that this kind of video was fun, please do leave it a like or give us some comments on how you would like us to continue making this kind of content, or if you just want to see us rolling some dice on the battlefield and going at each other. So, until next time, have it.